Every culture tells stories of monsters. Some of them drink blood, some watch from the tree line, some come in the night pressing down on the chest while the body sleeps. What's unsettling isn't that these stories exist, it's how often that they resemble one another. Across continents, centuries, and cultures that never met. Tonight, we're not asking whether monsters are real. We're asking why we keep seeing the same ones. This is Cryptids Without Borders, Folklore in the Dark. Exploring the shared nightmares of humanity, I'm your host, Kitty, and this is episode 1, The Old Fear Theory. Before we begin, I want to be clear about what this podcast is and what it isn't. Cryptids Without Borders, Folklore in the Dark is not about proving or debunking the existence of monsters. It's about the belief itself, about patterns, about what happens when human fear takes shape in stories, folklore, and shared memory. My background is in anthropology with a lifelong fascination for folklore, mythology, horror, and the unusual history. I approach cryptids not as an isolated curiosity, but as cultural artifacts, expressions of how societies understand danger, death, identity, and the unknown. Throughout the series, I'll be using anthropological and folkloric lenses to compare cryptids across cultures, always with respect, particularly when discussing indigenous or culturally specific traditions. These stories carry meaning far beyond entertainment. You don't need to believe in monsters to listen. You just need to be curious about why we fear them. So, what is the old fear theory? The old fear theory is simple. Cryptids are not random inventions, nor purely modern fantasies, but recurring expressions of ancient, deeply embedded human fears. These fears are older than language, older than civilization itself. When we strip away names, costumes, and cultural details, the same core anxieties emerge, retold in remarkably similar ways across the globe. Some fears manifest as predators lurking in the darkness. Others appear as creatures mimicking humans or watching from afar. Some dwell at thresholds, near water, or in the night, waiting at the edges of perception. By analyzing these stories through multiple lenses, we can begin to see patterns that reveal shared psychological and cultural roots. Humans are biologically wired to fear certain stimuli more readily than others. Evolutionary preparedness is the idea that some fears are inherited because they increased our ancestors' survival. These fears once helped keep us alive. Darkness, predators, being watched, being followed, sudden movements, unfamiliar sounds. These stimuli trigger strong emotional responses without conscious thought. Many cryptids often exaggerate these danger signals: glowing eyes at night, silent, unnatural movements, proximity to liminal spaces like forests or rivers. These stories feel instinctively correct, even before explanation. This instinctual fear is why stories of winged watchers, nocturnal predators, and shapeshifters recur across continents. Even if a person has never seen a wolf or a giant bird, the archetype resonates. Many cultures describe nocturnal watchers, for example, that sit silently in trees or on rooftops. Across Africa, North America, and Asia, these figures share common traits: large eyes, quiet presence, and a sense of being observed. Human brains are pattern-making machines on top of this. We constantly scan the environment for signs of threat or opportunity. We evolve to assume intent, even where there may be none, because missing a threat could be deadly. False positives were safer than false negatives. This is why a shadow in the corner becomes a creature. A rustle in the bushes becomes footsteps. A flicker of light becomes a glowing eye. A coincidence becomes a warning. Cryptids thrive in the space between perception and certainty. They exist in the gap our brains instinctively fill, where uncertainty meets instinct. Sleep paralysis accounts from Japan, the Kanashibari, European night hags, and African witch riders all describe beings pressing down on the chest, similar hallucinations emerging from universal neural patterns. Once we recognize threats, fear itself becomes a story, shaped, shared, and passed down. Fear is one of the most basic human emotions. Fear arrives before logic, before language, before reasoning. Cryptids give shape to this fear. They allow humans to externalize danger and anxiety, to name it, describe it, and warn others about it. Monsters warn children to avoid dangerous spaces. Creatures personify death, disease, or social transgression. Predators or shapeshifters explain otherwise inexplicable events. In this way, monsters are not just threats, they're tools for survival. Primal emotion also explains why the stories endure. Fear is memorable. Danger is attention-grabbing. The mind stores fearful experiences, real or imagined, more vividly than neutral ones. Terror management theory suggests that awareness of mortality creates profound anxiety, and that cultures develop systems to manage it. Cryptids often guard thresholds between life and death, human and animal, safety and danger. They appear in those liminal spaces, forests, rivers, cemeteries, or more generally in the night, reminding us of our own vulnerability. Some examples of this cultural significance: vampires and revenants protect taboos around death and burial. Water spirits often teach caution near rivers and lakes. Night watchers externalize the dread of unseen observers. In essence, monsters are a psychological buffer, a way to process that existential anxiety. And then finally, there's the fear of the unknown, the inexplicable, the indescribable, the beyond comprehension. Lovecraftian fear isn't about claws or teeth. It's about realizing that the universe is larger, stranger, and far less controllable than we imagine. Cryptids often exist themselves just beyond clarity. Blurred sightings, creatures only half seen, reports that resist explanation. Ambiguity is the core of horror, and a critical reason why similar monsters emerge globally. They occupy the gap between reality and imagination. When we analyze cryptids through these lenses, the anthropological, the psychological, we begin to see patterns emerge across cultures. Vampires, night watchers, winged omens, shapeshifters. Different names, different places, the same fears. These are not isolated myths. These are shared nightmares. Over this season, we'll explore these patterns, from creatures that mimic us, to those that watch from the dark, to those that appear just before disaster. We won't ask you to believe, we'll ask you to notice, because these stories don't persist because they're entertaining. They persist because they're familiar. In our next episode, we'll begin with a modern case, a creature seen in the 1960s tied to tragedy, prophecy, and collective fear. A winged figure, glowing red eyes, silent observation. The Mothman. Until then, remember, fear knows no borders.